Having spent a few days in Riverbend visiting companions, a substantial drive for someone residing in the Bayou State, I was preparing for my journey home. On my final evening, an old acquaintance, Liam, noticed my social media post and inquired about my departure plans. Upon learning I was leaving that day, he mentioned he lived an hour outside Riverbend, conveniently in my direction. It had been years since I'd seen Liam, and the idea of reconnecting sounded pleasant. He suggested I stop by, and I agreed. I set my navigation device for Liam's address, which indicated about an hour and a half's travel time. Liam and I had been classmates in secondary school, but had lost touch after graduating. We kept up with each other's lives through digital platforms, yet genuine conversation had ceased for a long time. When I arrived, I observed his residence had a rather classic appearance. It wasn't dilapidated, just aged. The timber porch groaned beneath my weight, and as he opened the door, I detected the aroma of aged timber and something earthy, akin to a rustic forest cabin. Liam, of course, was very welcoming, offering a warm embrace and ushering me inside. Some bonds, it seems, remain unaffected by the passage of time. The interior of the dwelling mirrored its exterior's age. The furnishings appeared to be from decades past, and each step on the plank flooring elicited a faint creak. It felt, in a way, characteristic of that region, quite charming, like stepping back in time. We settled in his sitting room, catching up on life, enjoying a few glasses of aged grain spirits. It was approaching late afternoon by then. One drink led to another, then another, and soon I found myself quite inebriated. The warmth of the spirits made the room feel smaller, more intimate, yet also heavier. Hours seemed to vanish in moments. We were genuinely enjoying our reunion. Eventually, Liam posed the question I anticipated. "Hey man, you've got a long drive ahead. Why don't you just stay here for the night?" he offered. I hesitated, but he was right. I was in no condition to be on the road. I agreed, saying, "Yeah, good idea," and asked if the sofa would suffice. He replied, "Nah, I've got a spare room. It's nothing fancy, but it's better than the couch." That was more than acceptable. We had some delivered Asian cuisine, and after a while, he guided me down a short passage to the guest sleeping quarters. I didn't pay much attention to the room's details, being quite intoxicated. Both of us were. But I do recall the air in the room felt stagnant, as if it hadn't been occupied in a long time. I barely had time to register my surroundings before I collapsed onto the bed, completely spent and inebriated. Sometime in the middle of the night, I awoke. My mouth was parched, my head spun, and the room was cloaked in darkness, save for a sliver of moonlight filtering through the window coverings. That's when I saw it. In the far corner of the room, on the wardrobe door, something was suspended. At first it resembled a lengthy dark overcoat on a stand, but as my eyes adjusted, its form seemed unnatural. It had a broad upper section, almost like shoulders, and the way it hung made it look less like fabric and more like a human outline. My heart hammered in my chest. I didn't recall seeing that when I'd stumbled into bed, but I had been drunk. Perhaps I simply hadn't noticed. I rolled over, attempting to dismiss it. It was just a garment, nothing more. But I couldn't resist. I peeked again. It was still there. I squeezed my eyes shut, took a deep breath, and forced myself to sleep. I don't know how long I was unconscious before I awoke again. It wasn't just discomfort that roused me from sleep. It was a sound. A slow, soft creaking, like someone carefully stepping on an old timber floor. My eyes snapped open. The room was now dimly illuminated, dawn's light creeping through the blinds. I turned my head toward the corner, and my stomach plummeted. The coat was gone. I sat up so quickly that my head spun. My body hummed with a nauseating blend of terror and residual alcohol. I scanned the room, my heart pounding against my ribs. There was nothing in the corner, just an empty wardrobe door. I threw off the covers and rushed to Liam's room. He was snoring, utterly oblivious to the panic storming through me. I shook him awake, which required significant effort, considering he was deep in sleep from all the spirits. He finally roused, very bewildered, rubbing his eyes. "The coat," I gasped. "The one on the stand in the spare room." He squinted at me, confused. "What coat?" he mumbled. "The dark overcoat, the one that was hanging on the wardrobe door. It looked almost like a person." Liam sat up, looking more alert now. "I don't own an overcoat, man. I don't even have a coat stand in that room," he stated. I stared at him, waiting for him to admit he was playing a trick on me, that this was some kind of jest, but his expression remained serious. "Come look," I urged. He sighed but got up and followed me back to the guest room. I pointed to the exact spot. "It was right there," I insisted. Liam scratched his head. He asked if I was sure I hadn't just been dreaming, but I said, "I know what I saw." My voice shook slightly. "I woke up and it was there, then I woke up again and it was gone." We stood in the room for a few moments, both of us feeling the same unsettling silence pressing in on us. Liam finally exhaled and shook his head, agreeing we should check the house just in case. We searched every chamber, every storage space, every nook. Nothing. No signs of forced entry, no peculiar coats hanging anywhere. Nothing that could explain what I had witnessed. Eventually, Liam tried to persuade me that perhaps I'd been in some kind of semi-conscious state, perceiving things that weren't there. I wanted to believe that, truly. I didn't want to contemplate the alternative. As soon as the sun was fully risen, I gathered my belongings, said my goodbyes, and began my drive. I almost felt a pang of guilt leaving him alone after that. The entire journey back to the Bayou State, my mind kept revisiting that moment. Waking up to that coat-like figure staring at me from the corner, the way it had simply vanished in the morning. Perhaps Liam played a cruel trick on me, but to this day, he has never confessed to anything, so I doubt that. Or perhaps, just perhaps, there had been someone in that house, observing me sleep, and they decided to depart before the morning light arrived. This occurred when I was 16, still attending secondary school. Lacking personal transport, I depended on my parents for rides or simply walked if the destination was close by. It was a weekend, and my friend Maya was hosting some friends, as her parents were away. My mother drove me to her residence. Maya resided nearby, about a 3-minute drive or a 20-minute walk. My mother was single at the time and also enjoyed socializing, so she informed me that if she was out late, I should either walk or arrange for a ride home, implying she had a date. A few of our female friends, Chloe, Sarah, and Emily, were already at Maya's house. The 5 of us spent a few hours in her garden until some boys from our school unexpectedly showed up. Money by unexpectedly, I mean Maya hadn't informed me she was inviting them. The reason for my annoyance was that one of the boys who appeared was someone with whom I had an irritating history and preferred not to encounter. Maya thought she was being clever and subtle by inviting him without my knowledge, supposedly because she wanted us to resolve our past issues. It just created an awkward situation. There were 4 boys and 5 girls, including myself. Eventually, I decided I wasn't really enjoying myself, so after a while, I departed. I'm sure others started to leave shortly after me, as it was already late, but I simply didn't want to be around those boys. I made sure to express my frustration to Maya via text messages as I walked home. She kept pleading, "Oh my goodness, please come back." She apologized and I forgave her, but I still just wanted to be home. I walked for about 5 minutes until I slowed my pace. I thought I heard footsteps behind me, and when I reduced my speed, I confirmed I heard footfalls that weren't my own. I turned around and saw a middle-aged man with a hood pulled over his head, his hands in his hoodie pocket. He was smiling, looking at me, and said, "How are you doing?" I replied, "Hello," and just turned and continued walking. We were in a residential area. People walk around, so it's not unheard of, even if it was late. Another 5 minutes passed, and every time I glanced behind me, That man was still there, more or less the same distance away, perhaps a little closer each time I looked. My path home wasn't straight. I had to make multiple turns onto intersecting roads to reach my house, and with every turn I made, he was still present. I was texting my friends about it when the man behind me spoke again. "Isn't it such a pleasant night?" "I love this climate." I replied, "Yes," and that was it. I began walking just a bit faster, but not enough to suggest I was fleeing. The man spoke again, and each time he opened his mouth, a part of me withered inside, wondering why he was talking to me, why he was following me. He asked, "Are you from this neighborhood?" I replied, "No," making my answer short and firm. The man chuckled. I started urgently asking all my friends for help, asking someone to send one of the guys to come pick me up. Ironically, the boy I was trying to avoid was on his way to get me. I'll call him Marcus. The man behind me then said something that changed everything. "I'm not going to hurt you. You live by the community school, right?" I spun around, and he stopped in his tracks. He was still smiling, but now his smile seemed more disingenuous, more sinister. I screamed, "Leave me alone," and started to run. I heard the man running behind me, gaining on me. At that point, my life felt on the line, so I started screaming bloody murder. I began yelling, "Help me!" for everyone in their houses to wake up, and he, the man, dropped his pleasant facade and yelled, "Shut up, you little..." My screams definitely scared him off, because he obviously didn't want a crowd of witnesses about to emerge from their houses. He ran away into the darkness, and I saw some lights in the surrounding houses flick on. A couple came out of their house, and I explained I had almost been abducted. I stayed there in front of their house until Marcus arrived to pick me up. He drove me home. It was only about a 1-minute drive from there. My mother wasn't home. She was out and wasn't answering my texts. I didn't want to be alone, so I invited Marcus in to stay the night. I know he was elated, but the ordeal wasn't over. We were up late, just talking and recalling old times, when we both heard footsteps circling the house. My room in that house was upstairs, facing the backyard. We heard the gate to the backyard opening. My mother would never enter through the backyard, so something was amiss. I refrained from yelling out, "Mom!" and instead, Marcus and I just looked out the window, watching. We didn't hear any more sounds. We were expecting to see someone walking around the yard, but instead, we both heard a man's voice say, "I see you up there." I let out a very audible gasp and stepped away from the window. Marcus yelled out something along the lines of, "We're contacting the authorities, you creep." That's precisely what we did. The fact that this man knew where I lived, he probably knew who I was. What if he knew I was going to Maya's house? Marcus did most of the talking on the phone with the emergency services. Looking back, I know he tried very hard to be the man in the situation, and I appreciated that. I was honestly so relieved he came inside. The law enforcement officers arrived, and their presence alone made me feel safer. Even just providing them with a description of this man made me feel better, like at least something was being done. My mother arrived home soon after, and she was just as terrified as I was. They kept a patrol car parked on the block for a few hours as a deterrent. Thankfully, from then on, I avoided walking at night. I was even afraid to go into our backyard after that. My mother had our uncle come over and install an entire security surveillance system. He made no effort to hide them. They were fully visible to deter that creepy man and any other unwelcome individuals from approaching that house. I'm glad to say that the story concluded there, because this incident also prompted my mother to sell that house about a year later, simply because she couldn't bear to see me living in constant fear in that residence. We never found out who that man was. This incident occurred when I was 18. I was on a trip with my parents and a friend, whom we'll call Bethany. The events unfolded in the Scandinavian country of Nordland during a road trip. My parents, Bethany, and I were embarking on a domestic journey, an 8-hour drive from home. Our intention was to visit a popular amusement park and then stay at a campground, though we hadn't secured a reservation. The day arrived, and we reached the city housing the amusement park. Our plan was to visit it the following day, so we needed a place to sleep. Since we had tents packed in our vehicle, my father searched online for a nearby camping ground. He located one that seemed suitable and conveniently close. He contacted the site, only to be informed that, unfortunately, it was a major sports tournament weekend, and the campground was fully booked. With no prior reservation, there was no room for us. My father made several more calls, but we couldn't find any reasonably priced campgrounds close to the amusement park. Our only recourse was to find a wild camping spot. We programmed the satellite navigation to the nearest parking area within a woodland to avoid any parking fines. Eventually, we discovered a secluded gravel lot within a nature reserve. Upon our arrival, there were a few individuals around, so we inquired if it was permissible to pitch our tents there, and if it was a safe location. A woman who appeared to be a hiker assured us it was a good place to sleep and that there were no parking wardens. Based on this, we decided to settle in the small, isolated gravel parking area. We were encircled by forest, and a mere 10-minute walk led to a shoreline. Initially, we considered setting up our tents on the beach, but an instinct told me it would be better to camp in the parking lot. As we exited the car to prepare our overnight shelters, I noticed a solitary vehicle parked further away in the lot. It looked dilapidated, and there was no one inside. I found this peculiar because it was already evening, implying no one would be at the beach or hiking in the woods. However, I didn't dwell on it at the time. I assisted my parents in erecting our tents. They would sleep in one, while Bethany and I shared the other. Both tents were positioned close together. After struggling to assemble them, we finally finished. Bethany and I made our tent comfortable, watched some streaming videos, and had some snacks. By this time, it was around 11 p.m. We aimed to get to sleep at a reasonable hour so we wouldn't be too tired the next day. After a while, around midnight, we decided to sleep. At this point, my parents were already asleep in their tent. Bethany and I were browsing social media on our phones when we suddenly heard a metallic clang from the parking lot. It sounded like a spade being dropped onto the gravel. We both flinched in fear and whispered to each other what it could be. Too scared to peek out of the tent window, we opted to remain silent and listen. The sound had originated from the same direction as the abandoned car. We then heard what I presumed was a spade being thrown into the vehicle's luggage compartment, followed by the compartment door slamming shut. We sat in silence, our hearts thumping. Then, we heard the car accelerate away, as if someone were trying to escape quickly. I sent a text message to a friend from a nearby city, informing him of our location. He replied, cautioning me that the adjacent shoreline was known to be hazardous, with organized criminals often engaging in illicit activities there. We had been completely unaware of this. When I read my friend's message, a cold wave of deep unease washed over me. About 10 minutes of silence passed after the car sped off. Bethany and I had begun to calm down slightly when, out of nowhere, we heard the loudest, most blood-curdling male scream emanating from the woods. We were utterly terrified. I immediately texted my mother, telling her we had just heard a loud scream. When she didn't respond, I called her phone to awaken her. She finally answered and said neither she nor my father had heard anything. She reassured me that it was likely nothing serious, but at that moment, I couldn't conceive of any normal explanation for someone to scream like that. Bethany and I huddled together on the blankets, terrified, not knowing what was happening. Every minute felt like an hour. Even though it was midnight, we were too frightened to sleep. Suddenly, everything became eerily silent. Then, my blood ran cold. I heard footsteps. Someone was walking around our tents, moving stealthily. Bethany and I sat up, frozen in fear. I put my phone down so that its light wouldn't illuminate the tent. My heart was racing, and I could hear my own pulse. There was no logical reason for anyone to be walking around our tents in the middle of the forest at this hour. The footsteps moved around our tent first, then toward my parents' tent, and then circled around our car, which was parked nearby. The person stopped and seemed to be looking at our tents for a moment. There was complete silence. Then, I heard the same car from earlier returning. Its headlamps illuminated our tents, and Bethany and I quickly lay down to avoid being seen. I mustered the courage to peek through the small tent window. I saw the car door slam shut before it sped off again. I felt a brief moment of relief when the person departed. From my vantage point, I could see the road they had driven down. 5 minutes later, I saw another car approaching fast. It was a patrol vehicle, racing in the same direction the other car had gone. Nothing else happened after that. Bethany and I were still shaken, so we decided to sit in the locked car to feel safer. I stayed awake until around 5 a.m., keeping watch over the forest, while Bethany eventually fell asleep beside me. After about an hour, we returned to our tent and, out of sheer exhaustion, finally fell asleep. We woke up around 9 a.m., completely drained. I recounted everything that had happened to my mother, and she revealed that she had also heard the footsteps. But when the person was near their tent, she had also heard heavy breathing, the kind you hear in suspense films during a chilling phone call. She had been terrified too. However, my father had slept through the entire ordeal, so we had to tell him the story. Without hesitation, we immediately packed our belongings and dismantled the tents, eager to leave as soon as possible. None of us wanted to stay there any longer. Despite the terrifying night, we had an enjoyable time at the amusement park later that day. However, that evening, I decided to research the woodland where we had camped. What I discovered made my stomach drop. Just a short time before our visit, a man had been murdered there, stabbed to death due to syndicate-related debts. Even more disturbingly, 2 individuals had gone missing from that exact shoreline and had never been located. I couldn't stop thinking about it. What if the person walking around our tents was a dangerous individual checking to see if there were any witnesses? What if we had been in serious peril without realizing it? Even now, I still ponder that night. Who made that horrifying scream? And why was someone using a spade in the middle of the night in a forest? And the police, what exactly were they pursuing? I suppose I'll never know. This is a story that still haunts me when I recall it.